Welcome to another DirectionsMag podcast, co-hosted with our friends at URISA.
Welcome everyone, I'm Xan Fredericks, one of the past chairs of URISA's Professional Education Committee. I work for the U.S. Geological Survey's National Geospatial Program, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Xan Stoker, to talk about what's new and now in the realm of remote sensing, specifically LiDAR. Now, if you're unfamiliar with LiDAR, LiDAR is an active remote sensing technique similar to radar or sonar, but instead of using radio or sound wave, LiDAR uses pulses of light to map the target. Jason, we're just so glad you could join us for this conversation. And to get started, would you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure, Xan. Thanks again for having me. So my name is Xan Stoker. I've worked for the USGS since about 2002. I currently am the Elevation Science and Applications Lead for the National Geospatial Program, based USGS headquarters, but I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I've been using and working with LiDAR for, I just looked at the calendar, almost 25 years now. So it's been a long time that I've been using this technology.
It sounds like it. What great real world LiDAR expertise we have in you. So relating to the real world, Jason, I wondered if you had some examples or case studies where LiDAR data have been used effectively for various projects or perhaps even some research endeavors.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a pretty wide open question there, Xan. I think my short answer nowadays is what isn't LiDAR being used for? It's been really amazing to watch over the years to see how this technology has been adopted by all kinds of real world applications. And I think the best thing to mention here is a study that we just completed last year called the 3D Nation study, which we spent several years going out and interviewing federal, state, local, private sector people to find out all the different ways that people are using LiDAR and what their requirements are, especially as we look towards the next generation of the 3D elevation program, which I'll probably delve into in a little bit. But yeah, LiDAR's being used for all kinds of different business uses, from looking at how to track water supply and quality, ecosystem management, coastal management, forest resource management, rangeland management, geologic applications, especially as it relates to resource mining and extraction. Let's see. There's other like infrastructure applications such as construction management, looking at things like urban and regional planning. So many different types of uses of LiDAR now. I don't know if there's any of those in particular you'd like me to go on and delve a little bit deeper into, Xan.
Well, that you caught my attention with delve a little bit deeper. Having lived for over 20 years in coastal Florida, I always think of coastal applications when it comes to LiDAR. So I was wondering if you could explain what topobathymetric LiDAR is and how it differs from traditional LiDAR technology.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, so a typical topographic LiDAR system usually operates a laser that's in the near infrared wavelength, which does a really good job at getting returns off of vegetation and solid features such as bare earth. In a topographic LiDAR system, they're typically built using a green laser instead of a near infrared laser. And the primary reason for that is because a near infrared laser, if anyone has a remote sensing background, knows that in the near infrared wavelength, water absorbs that wavelength pretty well. So the only time you're ever going to get any information from a near infrared laser is if that laser beam hits the water surface in a pretty precise fashion, something called a specular reflection, where basically the water looks like a mirror and bounces those photons back. But in a topographic or topobathymetric LiDAR system, the green laser tends to penetrate the water a lot better. And so that type of laser is being used to look at the trying to image both the water surface as well as the water column, all the way as far down as you can get to possibly see the ground underneath the water there, either in the coastal areas, as you mentioned, or even inland. And so you can get this nice three-dimensional structural information of everything that's going on in that a water body that you're imaging. So that's the other nice thing about topobathymetric lasers, because I'm focusing on the bathymetric part, but it also does reflect off of features off of the surface above the water as well. So we can get a nice continuous three-dimensional image above and below the water surface for the areas that the aircraft are flying over.
You mentioned inland bathymetry, and that explanation right there that you get, both the land and then what's submerged sounds really applicable, especially when it comes to inland bathymetry. And I wondered what some of the key applications and advantages of inland bathymetry mapping would be.
Oh, sure. Yeah. A couple of the big ones, that I know, well, obviously you've worked on, Xan, as well as folks in NOAA and the Corps of Engineers, is really looking at some of these coastal management things, especially as it relates to resilience, hurricane impact forecasting, for example, understanding sea level rise, storm surge, by being able to have this continuous elevation surface above and below water. Modelers are able to better model how that water is going to move from the ocean on land, especially as it relates to things like storm surge, sea level rise, winds from hurricane impacts and things like that.
That makes sense. And you said with 25 years of experience in the LiDAR realm, and then also with your knowledge of the topobathy LiDAR, I wondered what advancements or developments specifically in LiDAR technology are you most excited about?
Yeah, there's still a lot going on. Some of the latest developments, I think, are some of the same ones that the commercial LiDAR manufacturers have been working on for years now, and that's really how to maximize the aerial collection rate to get the most amount of three-dimensional information as you fly over your area of interest. So being able to have sensors that can fly higher and faster and collect as dense, or in some cases even more dense, amounts of information as they could previously is really one of the big things that I've seen is in terms of development from the commercial sector. And as a consumer of LiDAR and someone who pays to get this data acquired for us, the ability to lower the cost per square mile that's being acquired, especially in a fixed budget, allows us to collect larger areas with that same amount of funding. So that's been a really great development. We've seen systems that have been able to fly higher and collect more dense data, especially over the past 5-10 years. And I've even heard about some applications now. There's some companies that are looking to do a constellation of LiDAR instruments from space to really increase that aerial collection rate in terms of being able to image the whole globe, perhaps in even a single year, which just 5 years ago would have been unheard of. Another thing I'm working on in terms of the flying higher ability is stratospheric LiDAR is something that we're really interested in. Can we put a LiDAR system on a stratospheric platform that flies at 65,000 feet above the ground? And similar to a satellite mapping application, you can fly a large area autonomously and be able to collect data there. There's also a couple projects I know that are being proposed to NASA to collect high density, high accuracy data over swaths across the entire globe as well. So I'm seeing a lot of these abilities to collect LiDAR move higher and higher in altitude, and while trying to maintain this high density, high accuracy information that we've kind of grown accustomed to now from airborne platforms.
That's so interesting. So you just mentioned some really cool emerging trends and potential future developments. How might these innovations reshape the field of geospatial technology?
Ooh, yeah, I think especially some of these applications that are enabling um, higher aerial collection rates and getting us data in a more streamlined pipeline than maybe what we currently have with airborne collections. I think really enables itself to this concept of high accuracy, high resolution 3D imaging over time. So if there are opportunities to get global LiDAR coverage annually, that's a huge change from our more opportunistic types of collections that we've done as part of the 3D elevation program, where based on the requirements that we know people have a need for high res data, and as the years have gone on, the demand for higher and higher resolution and higher accuracy has grown, but also this ability to get this type of information more frequently than maybe once per 8 to 10 years would be a real game changer for going from just a map it once, use it many times mantra to a more of a high resolution monitoring type program, especially as the 3D elevation program has almost collected a once over baseline for the conterminous US.
That's a really good point because especially nowadays, I feel like the term digital twin is such a hot topic, right? This idea of having a digital representation of what is on the earth, what is in the earth, what is, use your imagination. And to your point, especially in areas that are impacted by hazards or have very vast and quick infrastructure updates, I think having it as rapidly as you were saying would definitely benefit the geospatial community at large. Can you talk a little bit more about how LiDAR itself could be integrated into models to really leverage this idea of a digital twin?
Yeah, and Zane, you're absolutely right. The concept of digital twins is blowing up as well, and I think in order to create a good digital twin, we're going to have to really focus on how do we integrate a whole bunch of different data streams together to get this concept that you're talking about, where we can do things like simulations and models at the personal scale, which is really what a digital twin is kind of gearing for, is this whole um, three-dimensional representation of reality, really. And in order to do that, you really want to have high accuracy, high resolution data to perform on, because you can always downsample the data to look at it and model it in different aspects, but you can't really go the other direction. So um, creating things like a digital twin become really exciting when we start talking about this whole idea of making maps personal and making simulations at this kind of personal level. And the multi-temporal is definitely one part of it. And I think the combination between sensors and systems and integrations of those are going to become very important to especially capture a lot of the localized changes that maybe you don't necessarily want to wait for either an airborne or satellite collection, but you can go out and collect it that week with a drone or with a car using mobile LiDAR mapping systems, or in the civil engineering applications, going out and collecting data using a terrestrial laser scanning or ground-based LiDAR that collects centimeter uh, level resolution data for things, and then you can integrate all that data together as long as you have a, uh, um, a reference frame that enables you to tie all this data together.
And with that, once you have all these great data sets, right? Say we find a way to merge them all together, right? We have that common reference frame that allows us to do that. I think the sticking point might be the accessibility, right? How will people use it if they aren't familiar with either GIS tools or software? So I wondered, especially when it comes to LiDAR, if there's notable software tools that are being used to effectively visualize what LiDAR data sets are available.
Yeah, and I think the transition to cloud computing has really made this explode. So for 3DEP, for example, we've been working on this transition of our data to the cloud in order to enable things like streaming the point clouds to view and manipulate in 3 dimensions, and being able to use some of these kind of big data processing tools have become really important, because as anyone that's worked with LiDAR knows, it's a lot of data, even at the localized level. To begin to process this, you have to have either pretty beefy computers, or you have to have smart ways to break the data up into manageable units and run things in parallel. Um, and that's to both for analytics as well as for visualization. So creating things like octrees and indices in order to stream, and you only stream a certain amount of points depending on the level of detail and the zoom level that you're looking at. So you're not having to pull all the data across the pipe before you do anything like analysis or visualization. I think is really important. And then in the integration piece, this is where the cloud is also becoming really valuable to us, because there are methods such as data mesh and data fabric, um, concepts that enable you to connect to various cloud-based repositories, and you can put analysis in front of and visualizations in front of these various buckets of data, and it doesn't even matter what cloud provider you're in, as long as you have kind of a common operating framework with the data. You can bring data in from that USGS holds, for example, and NOAA holds, or a DOT holds, that's mobile mapping data, or even something like the Forest Service, who may have not even LiDAR, but they have point clouds generated from stereo imagery. We can bring all these disparate data together much more easily now that everything's kind of been enabled in a cloud-based infrastructure.
Which I'm so thankful for, because I feel like that will improve the accessibility, especially for those, again, that aren't familiar with GIS or don't have, right, the big graphics card or enough memory on their system.
Yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about the LiDAR Explorer tool? I know you're really involved with that. It's one of my favorite applications to let people out on the landscape know about, simply because they don't have to pull the LiDAR to their system to dig into it. So I just wondered if you could give us a little insight into that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so LiDAR Explorer is one of our own kind of homegrown viewers and download tools that you can use, where basically kind of we distilled it down to a web browser view that just show me what point cloud data and what Bear DM data do you have? Show me where it is, and you can click on it and you can find out what project it is, the information from that project, and you can view it streaming in 3 dimensions, like I mentioned, through a web browser interface, which is really nice. You don't have to download the data first before you know what it looks like. And then that's kind of the front end piece. And then the back end piece is that cloud-based part that I was mentioning too, that it's been really effective in enabling others and who can take that data that we're managing and provisioning and providing. And a lot of times, there are a lot of folks that can do like what you were saying, make these data usable without necessarily being an expert. And they can do a lot of things better than we can at USGS, in fact. And as long as we manage and provision the data properly, there's a lot of folks out there who have been able to tap into our data and then put their own processing and visualization spins on it and provide capabilities and ways to use the data that we just don't have the resources to do ourselves anymore. We're so focused on just making this data available to the end user. It's hard to put all these nice custom tools in front of it anymore. So a good example of that would be a group called Open Topography, they've been managing NSF funded data for years. Just a few years ago, they were able to tap into our data in the cloud, and they have a lot of cool processing tools that we do not make available, that users in the academic community can now tap into 3D data using Open Topography and access data that way. Microsoft Planetary Computer is another one. They have actually taken a copy of our data. A company called Hobu has converted all of the data that we have made available into a new file format, cloud optimized point cloud format, which is it's similar to a cloud optimized GeoTIFF, where it's index streamable, all that good stuff, but it's still a LAZ file. So any software that can read LAZ can also read these cloud optimized point cloud data. And then they've been able to use the power of the Planetary Computer Cloud to spin off all these derived products that we simply don't have the resources to do ourselves. One of them that I'm really that I like a lot is the height above ground at 2 meters that they've generated for all the point cloud data that we have in 3DUP, which is not a small amount. I think last time I looked, there's over 54 trillion LiDAR points in our repository, and growing every day as we publish more and more data. And then, obviously this was all kind of thanks to Amazon, and Amazon making the data available through its public data set program. That's really opened up opportunities. And we see more and more external people tapping into the data and making derivatives and creating information from this data that we never could with the resources that we have.
54 trillion data points. That's a lot of data. That's a lot of modeling. My goodness.
Yeah, it's a lot of data. I mean, when you think about it, every one of these points is not just a point per se, but it is a point with a bunch of attributes associated to it. Now, we don't have adopt a point kind of thing where we tag people's names to every point in the data set, but we could. That would be possible to do someday, but I don't know if we'll ever have the resources to give everybody their 150,000 personal points or not.
No, probably not, but I still love when you think of it that way, right? To me, 54 trillion is just a number. But when I break it down and realize that if each person in the United States were given some points, that's a lot of points. That helps me visualize the amount, right? The immensity of the points that are being offered, that are accessible out there, especially with 3D data, right? That's free of charge without use restrictions, that's available out there. And you've been talking about combining disparate data sets, making them available. It's all so multifaceted. So how important is collaboration between the experts, between the platforms that you mentioned that are serving these data sets? How important is that collaboration in successfully applying LiDAR technology?
Oh yeah, I mean collaboration is really the reason why the 3D elevation program has been successful. We've never been funded as a national mapping agency to go and march across the country and collect LiDAR in a systematic fashion without partners and without this collaboration and honestly without LiDAR being a technology that you can collect once and use for so many different applications, we probably wouldn't be where we are today. So it's not only just collaboration isn't only important on the data acquisition side for us, but also the ability to uh, take a single data set and look at it in so many different ways has really been beneficial. An example that we're doing right now, if you're looking for examples, is we're investigating the possibility of acquiring NAPE imagery at the same time or concurrently with 3D LiDAR. Typically, these two programs have operated independently and mostly had to do not only with the contracting and the partners, but the technical issues there where you know LiDAR not I wouldn't say typically, but is often collected at night simply because you get less solar noise coming back. You also the air is a lot calmer for these aircraft to be flying, and obviously you can't collect imagery at night. Also, the NAPE program likes to, and I think it may even be mandated that they collect their imagery during peak growing season. And we typically collect 3D LiDAR in leaf-off conditions to kind of maximize the chances of us imaging the ground below vegetation. So we've been working on we've had a couple pilots now looking at trying to acquire in a single collection. And so we're working on trying to collect that data together, and collaborating with the folks that collect data for NAPE has been really useful for us because now we're asking questions that are kind of multidisciplinary to see if there's an answer that can satisfy both groups together. So that's been a fun project to work on.
It sounds like it, and I especially love the idea of reducing the duplication of effort, right? And the idea
Yeah.
that if you could fly once but collect two different data sets, wow, imagine the reduction in the carbon footprint and
Yep.
all of the other resources that are used when making those flights. Again, LiDAR is such a great technology for its great swath width because you're at the flying height you are, right? Versus a lower flying height, things like that. But to then further take advantage of that flight to collect additional data sets, I think that would be brilliant and a good way of leveraging the resources among different agencies. So to your point
Yeah.
about collaboration, it does seem like it is key going forward. I mean, it was key before, but it's especially paramount now.
Yeah, and mobilization and just um, airplane fuel in itself is a major expense. So if you can have two collections going on at using the same aircraft, there's definitely potential cost savings there. And this kind of ties back to some of the developments as well. In the past, um, the altitudes that were flown to collect imagery and LiDAR were different as well. And with some of the advances in both LiDAR as well as, just passive spectral remote sensing imaging, that discrepancy has really gone down. And there's also the fact that the appetite for higher resolution imagery has kind of changed the altitudes and the flight plans that are being flown now. As I mentioned, you can always downsample as long as you have, the higher resolution data to downsample from. So a lot of companies will collect imagery at a much higher resolution than maybe they're even contracted for, and then take that higher resolution data and use that as a kind of a resell opportunity to um, defray some of the costs that they've gotten from flying at those lower altitudes to get higher resolution data.
That makes sense. Do you think they ever run into a challenge, though, with the storage of such dense data sets? Because I've got to think it's almost exponential, right? If you go from, say, 2 points per square meter to 20 plus, that data set has to be quite large in hopes that someone's going to want to downsample or to, at some point, leverage that many points. Have you heard of any challenges with data storage such as that?
I mean, what I've always heard is there's no problem that money can't solve, right? So it's one of those things. I think that, the cost of storage has gone down a lot, and the maturation of, these cloud computing and cloud storage opportunities have really kind of changed that. So it's not so expensive as it used to be able to store and manage these large data sets. A lot of times the processing and, turning that data into information, sometimes the models have not even been developed to handle that level of detail. So I know there's, a project that we've been working on. We have created derivatives, from 3 to 10 meter resolution, because that's the models were developed on data that was at that resolution versus, 1 meter to half meter dense data. So a lot of times even the models themselves need to catch up with this data versus, being able to handle the storage and processing.
That makes sense. I hadn't thought of it that way, but I love the perspective that you bring to that, right? That it has decreased in cost. It's probably just like how back in the day, right? You've been doing this for 25 years. I'm sure that the cameras installed on the plane systems that were taking concurrent imagery were very low megapixel. And nowadays, right, you can, not the sky's the limit, but goodness, what an increase in resolution that you've got from the cameras alone. So it makes sense that just like that increase, the storage costs would decrease. It's just a factor of time, I guess.
Yeah, it's that part's so interesting because when I started, we were all excited about, collecting data in the hertz range, so we're collecting, 1 to 10,000 points per second, and that was a huge deal. And now there are systems that can collect 2 million points per second. It's just amazing, how much that technology has grown since I started my career and now.
That makes sense. And to wrap things up, what do you find most exciting about the idea of new and now when it comes to developments in remote sensing, specifically in the context of LiDAR? Would it be this exponential increase in the number of points and the kilohertz and those kind of advancements, or is there something else that tickles your fancy that you're really excited about?
Oh yeah, that's a pretty wide open question too. So you started and ended with some wide open questions, Dan. In this case, the most exciting thing for me is that we are going to be awash in data. We're going to have more data from more different data streams than we're going to know what to do with. And it's not just LiDAR. I've seen an explosion in things like SAR satellites and creating high resolution DSMs from satellite stereo data. We've got the mobile mapping data. We've got UAS data. We've got this explosion of data and this increase in precision and resolution. All of these things are, kind of coming down to being able to do things at, the scale that was unimaginable, just 10 years ago, as well as the geodetic precision and the changes in geodesy that are coming that are going to make these reference frames even more accurate than they were. And then, the buzzword that we always hear nowadays is, AI and machine learning. And those to me are going to be the tools we're going to need to develop in order to make and extract information out of all of these different data streams and all of this different data that we're just being inundated with nowadays. So AI and machine learning to me is one of the most exciting things that I'm really looking forward to seeing how people are going to take those processes and quickly convert this massive data into information that people can use for decisions from planning to just even daily activities, for example.
I love that perspective. And I too am very excited to see where it will take us in the future. So Jason, thank you so much for an illuminating conversation today about what's new and now in the realm of remote sensing to us all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Xan.